Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the 99 Names. I'm your host, Bilal Khan, and this is my guest, Ammar AlShukry.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
And this episode, I am told that we are covering the name of Allah.
Hayyee.
Not Hayyee, which is different.
Not Hayyee. We're adding another ya to it.
We're doing Hayyee.
Hayyee. So Hayyee is the haya is modesty and shyness.
Okay. So Allah is modest and shy.
That's what we have to go over.
Okay.
Because it is an interesting attribute. But firstly, where do we get this concept? Well, first in the hadith that's reported by Abu Dawood and the Nasa'i, the Prophet ﷺ had seen a man bathing without using a lower garment.
Okay.
So this man was basically
bottomless
in public.
Okay.
Or where he could at least be spotted easily.
So I don't understand. Person is bathing. Wouldn't they be just straight up naked?
Yes, but you use the izar as some sort of barrier. You basically have to do it with... you can't... There's no shower or anything. They're doing it in public anyway. So what they're doing is they use the izar to cleanse themselves without being seen.
Oh, so we're talking like old village style.
I mean, it was an old village.
Okay. Like, because in India, they have the lungi, right? Which... some of them wear the lungi to go to the...
you have to go back 1,400 years ago.
Okay.
It helps.
Or 400 years.
Or 400 years.
Yeah. I mean, how much different was life 400 years ago in a quote-unquote third world in comparison to 1,400 years?
Not that long. In fact, my village in Sudan right now, when I see like these like 3D renderings of what the Prophet's Medina looked like.
Yeah.
It looks like my village now.
It's like, it's amazing how different
like
parts
the
of the
clay houses and things like. I mean, I've witnessed clay houses until recently.
They whenever they filmed movies that are like old West, old time, early Americas, you know where they go? They go to Canada. Like literally, they go to like Alberta, Canada. Even before that, you know those Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. They'd go to Italy, and they would film them there, because like, oh, this looks like the Old West.
Very, very. So this man was he was basically without using an izar, a lower garment or a lungi. And so the Prophet ﷺ got up on the minbar and he praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, called the people, of course, praised Allah. And then he says, Inna Allah azza wa jal hayyun sittirun. Allah is hayyee, shy or modest, and sittir. He loves to conceal.
Okay.
So whoever of you is bathing, then let them use an izar. Or whoever of them is bathing, he says, إِذَا اغْتَسَلَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَسْتَتِرْ. Then let them conceal themselves.
Okay.
So he uses that to prove Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or he proves that Allah is hayyun, sittir. We already went over the name of sittir.
Sure.
But the hayyee, the second hadith in which al-hayyee is mentioned is the hadith of Salman al-Farisi, which is reported by Tirmidhi. And that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says that your Lord is hayyun kareemun. He is
shy and generous.
Yastahi, he is shy, that if one of you raises their hands to pray to him, that he allows for those hands to go back down
empty
and rejected. Okay, so this is the two hadith in which this concept is mentioned. So how do we understand this notion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being modest or shy? Or what does haya actually mean? Haya means to refrain yourself from doing anything that is qabih, anything that is vile, anything that's vulgar. That's what we would call, a person who does that, we would call them shameless.
Sure.
Right? And so haya is also considered a sense of shame, that you refrain yourself.
But shame doesn't really capture it, does it?
None of these words actually capture it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we use one shade of each word to kind of create this translation that we're trying to do. But shame has the aspect of you refraining from doing something that will bring you shame.
Okay.
Someone who doesn't have that refraining mechanism, we call that person shameless.
Is this why they is it? I don't know if it's a hadith or an ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning,
Inna Allah la yastahi min al-haq. Allah says Allah does not shy away from the truth.
Well, I was actually thinking, for those who have no shame, go do whatever you want.
No, that's a hadith.
Okay.
But it's also, yes, the Prophet ﷺ says, and he uses the word haya.
Okay.
He says, Inna mimma adraka an-nas. What has reach the people.
Yeah.
From the statement of the earliest prophets.
Yeah.
Is if you have no shame, then do what you wish.
Okay.
Because haya in that sense is supposed to be a mechanism that refrains you from doing something that's stupid or vile or vulgar or what have you.
So it's not even in relation to showing skin specifically. It has to do with an overall individual's behavior towards that is upstanding. And if you, and the idea of having
a certain standard for yourself.
Yes.
That your actions and your don't go below that standard.
So more importantly, having haya would be more equatable to being classy.
Okay.
Maybe.
I could see that. Yeah. I could see, again, all of these words have like one aspect or two maybe that share this concept.
Classy versus trashy.
Classy versus shameless.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, having or dignified or what have you, all of these kind of concepts revolve around it. And so al-haya, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being hayyee, meaning that his actions and all of these things, they don't go beyond.
Would izzah fall into it? Honor?
It's similar to dignity,
okay,
but not haya.
Okay.
So what we did was we said haya might share an aspect of dignity, and dignity shares an aspect of izzah.
Yeah.
But those two don't really.
Okay, I got it.
And that's why a lot of times with the names of Allah, I tell my students, like, you need a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Like the Venn diagram helps so much because there's so many names that'll share one aspect with each other, but they'll have many other connotations that the other name doesn't share.
Okay.
So as for al-hayyee, at the end of the day, we can't imagine how Allah is hayyee.
Yeah.
We understand what haya means, but we don't know the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's quote unquote modesty or shyness or all of these types of things. We know how human beings are shy. We know what modesty means with regards to human beings. But these names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the end of the day, their essence or their reality, we don't know with regards to any of them.
Okay.
But we know what the names mean. And so what does that inspire in us of action? Well, number one, we learn that modesty in and of itself is a beautiful quality. The Prophet ﷺ praises modesty. The Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah is shy or modest in encouraging us or invoking or commanding us rather to conceal ourselves when we bathe, right? He's trying to instill in us a sense of communal modesty and individual modesty.
Now, one of the things that always a lot of people ask about is the question of this term, this concept of modesty. What is it? How do you communicate it to today's day and age?
Again, it's the same idea of refraining from anything that is considered to be vile or vulgar or what have you.
But then one might also must answer, because what would be considered vile and vulgar in one time and space might not necessarily be considered that.
Then the Sharia becomes the judge.
Okay.
There's some aspects, which is of course fluid because culture is fluid.
Sure.
And then there is some aspects of it which is bound by the Sharia.
But the things that aren't specifically bound by the Sharia,
then it's fluid according to culture.
Okay. But then if you go against the culture, it is still inappropriate. Islamically.
If it goes against the culture, it is still inappropriate.
Because although it is not necessarily defined by the Sharia.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We have an entire principle that says that Adam Muhakkama, which is that customs rules.
Okay.
And a lot of times with regards to the concept of muru'ah or chivalry or, goodness and wholesomeness, that becomes something that is completely based on the Sharia. So for example, you may have, I know for a fact in Sudan, a guy wearing shorts.
Would be totally inappropriate.
Totally inappropriate.
Okay.
Shar'i wise, you can wear shorts.
Yeah.
Absolutely a death sentence. Not a death sentence, literally, but just a cultural death sentence in Sudan for a guy to wear.
Right.
Like this guy has no class. This person has no hayat.
Right.
This person has no modesty. This person has all.
It's like my wife was telling me about her cousin in Saudi, and how her cousin is from here. They visited Saudi, and they were going to go to the masjid. And she had her regular clothes on, and then she was just going to throw an abaya on top. And her aunt was just like, "Wait, what are you doing? This is not how you go to the masjid." She's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "You have jeans on. Like, that's not Islamic clothing."
She's like, "I'm wearing an abaya over."
Yeah. She's like, "Doesn't matter. You still have to wear appropriate clothing underneath." But I guess apparently that's the at least her family's culture, if not the social culture there. Mm-hmm. But like in that situation, like if I were in that individual's position, I'd be like, I don't care what you think is appropriate. I'm going by what is right and right. But that's
is right. Also because of your Americanness.
Okay.
America celebrates the individuality. You were socialized to believe that that's acceptable behavior.
Okay.
Which is to say, I don't care what you think.
Right.
And to be completely comfortable in saying that because you were raised in America.
Whereas to take heed of what other people feel and what other people think is in fact expected in another culture and society.
Yeah. Because that's how you actually show respect to them.
Okay.
You don't think that you're actually being disrespectful in saying that, but they might take that as incredible disrespect.
Interesting. And so is this where this idea where maybe some people of a particular skin pigmentation have the idea correct, where they try to be culturally sensitive?
I don't know. What do you mean?
Like, you know, when some people like, maybe they sometimes white people overdo it. They're like, and they assume a person of a particular culture so they could learn the stereotypical things about that culture. And then they assume that person follows those elements.
Yeah. But I mean, I think everybody does that though. It's not just white people. Like, you know, if you meet anybody from any different part of the world, there's you've got some information stored about that place.
Sure.
And so you're just kind of rattling off what you know. And that's beautiful. I think it's not something that's bad at all because Allah says we've made you into nations and tribes that you may know one another. And so part of the benefit of you being from a particular nation or a particular tribe is that whenever I meet you, there is some sort of common ground that we can immediately build on.
Yeah.
So I say to somebody, I'm from America. They're like, oh, where in America? Chicago, New York, Houston, where?
Yeah.
They've now downloaded what they have of an informational reservoir about America, and now they can try to figure out a way to connect with me.
Yeah.
They say that they're from China. Boom. Now I have some things to ask them about China. Right?
Karate Kid.
As opposed to imagine if every individual was from their own individual world.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of which, karate is a Japanese art of martial art, not Chinese. Chinese is Kung Fu, Wing Chun. So that was one of the things that annoyed me about the Karate Kid with Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan is Chinese, but it shouldn't have been called Karate Kid. It should have been called like Kung Fu Kid.
Obviously, but they're building off of a brand. They're building off of a franchise.
Yeah.
So you can calm down. Hashtag.
You know, speaking of which, Will Smith is the executive producer of the new YouTube series called Cobra Kai. I saw all 10 episodes. It's really good.
That's really interesting.
Ammar's like, whatever. How did we get to this from Hayyee?
Yeah, so let's wrap up this episode.
Okay.
So we were basically saying that a person implement modesty as best as they can, that they refrain from doing that which is vulgar.
Yeah.
And of course, with regards to anything that's set as a Sharia standard for modesty, that obviously be something that they implement.
Now, where does the concept of al-Hayyee and Haya translate into the
life?
Not just life, but like, because one of the most talked about aspects of when people look at Muslims from the outside looking in, and even people inside the culture of or the community of Muslims, when they talk about Haya, one of the first things they talk about is hijab. And when they talk about hijab, they talk about the headscarf.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what are the specific lines here?
So something very interesting. The Prophet ﷺ, he told us that every religion has its own, has a distinguishing characteristic.
Okay.
And the distinguishing characteristic of Islam is haya. And so it's interesting that you kind of pointed that out, that, you know what, when people look at the Muslim world, what is the first thing that they see? They see that unique characteristic that we have, which is the characteristic of haya. How does it manifest? It manifests, like you mentioned, with regards to women in general and with regards to hijab.
Yeah.
But haya with regards to the hijab is not just with regards to wearing a headscarf. It is a state of mind. It is a state of being. And it's not just for women. Actually, you know, the Prophet ﷺ, when he praises a particular companion for their shyness, it's Uthman. So the symbol of shyness in the companions is actually not a woman.
Right.
It's a man.
Yeah.
Like how does that reframe our general conversations about haya? Most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, when the conversation of haya is being discussed, it is being directed towards our sisters.
part of, in regards to Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, was a lot of his shyness manifested in his generosity?
Well, that's one aspect of it.
Okay.
So we said that Hayyee is to refrain from anything that is considered to be just not positive or anything that's vulgar, what have you.
Is that why he didn't respond during the fitnas?
But no, he didn't respond during the fitnas because he didn't. One, the Prophet ﷺ told him he told them not to give up the garment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would cloak him with.
Yeah.
And two, he didn't want to be the first person to shed blood in this ummah. Up until the time of Uthman's killing, there had never been any incident of Muslims killing one another. The Prophet ﷺ had told us, and he said that once the sword is drawn out on this ummah, it will never be sheathed again.
Okay.
So whoever becomes the first person to sheath the sword on this ummah, like, it's never gonna stop. And so Uthman didn't want to be that first person.
Okay.
He would rather have been the one who's killed than be the one who's killer. And that whole story is just unbelievable, amazing.
Yeah.
We don't have the time for that now. But that being said, Uthman radiallahu anhu had a very natural shyness.
Okay.
A very natural shyness about himself. So there's a lot of things that he says about himself, but of them is, for example, he says, I never touched my private parts with my right hand ever since I pledged allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with it.
Okay.
So over a period of decades, right? Aisha radiallahu anha, one time the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was kind of sitting down and he was reclined and he kind of had a little bit of his thigh exposed in his like relaxed position.
Yeah.
And then someone entreats entrance upon him, and it was Abu Bakr. The Prophet gives permission. Abu Bakr leaves, and then another person entreats entrance, and it's Umar, and the Prophet gives him permission, and he leaves. And the entire time, the Prophet was never he never shifted. Yeah. And then another person entreats entrance, and it's Uthman. The Prophet says, wait, and then he sits himself up, and he kind of fixes his position, and then he allows him to enter. And Aisha asks him about that later, and he says, should I not be shy from someone whom the angels are shy from?
Right.
So Uthman radiallahu anhu is this symbol of shyness. With regards to us, to come back to the topic of hijab,
how do you reconcile this idea of being shy and not remove it from the thought of being timid?
I think shyness and timidity is something that's different from each other.
Okay.
Because at the same time, Uthman radiallahu anhu is present in all of the moments of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah.
Whenever he is needed, he is there. In anything that he is needed to do, he is there, and he fulfills it at the highest level. So it's not a matter of being, not taking initiative, and it's not an issue of what we would call to be timid.
Yeah.
It is, again, to refrain from anything that would be blameworthy.
Okay.
You won't find Uthman doing any. Uthman says, I never committed zina in Islam or before Islam.
Okay.
I never whether it's drinking alcohol, I believe that was Abu Bakr. But in any case, he refrains, just incredibly dignified, right? Refrains from doing anything that is considered to be vulgar or vile. Okay. Choosing their words carefully, not being loose with anything that they do.
And because I'm just thinking about, just in contrast, I'm thinking about Umar bin Khattab, somebody who is very passionate, very, I guess, on fire, so to speak.
But I wouldn't describe Umar as not being Hayyee.
Okay.
Because again, from Umar, you're not going to see things that are inappropriate. You're not going to see slips of the tongue. Okay. You're not going to see, you're not going to see things that are just awkward from him. Very, very deliberate in the things that he does and the things that he says. Okay.
With Uthman bin Affan, how does that manifest? Like, if the guys were to take back the symbol of shyness and modesty,
I think the shyness and the modesty again comes in your interactions with people. Okay. So of course there are basic manifestations of shyness and modesty. I can't be someone who's modest and I'm taking like like inappropriate selfies, for example, with regards to showing people parts of my body that would be inappropriate to show. And I'm using the word inappropriate because we know what the Sharia commands for people to cover. Yeah. Right? Belly button to the knees. Okay. With a difference of opinion even with regards to the thigh.
Sure.
But is that something that's considered to be appropriate? Okay. So with regards to that, a lot of times with the girls we have, obviously they have their own Shari'i requirements with the way that they dress, and the guys kind of just take it, okay, well, I can flex my biceps and I can do whatever. But I don't believe that to be appropriate. I think that people need to be wiser with regards to the things that they select to do. Then even with regards to our statements, the way that we talk, the way that we carry ourselves, the way that we interact with people, the jokes that we make. All of this recognizing that everything that you do will be held accountable for.
So for both men and women, the manifestation of Hayyee in the implementation of the very nature of who Allah is would be more so in the behavior and the actions that they make and the interactions they have with everyone else.
Even just guarding yourself.
Okay.
You know that notion of guarding yourself? And hence the Prophet ﷺ on one time, he said, have true shyness from Allah. And they said, well, what do you mean by true shyness? Like, what is that? And he said that you guard the head and what it contains.
Okay.
Like, you guard your thoughts.
Okay.
You guard your fantasies. You guard your...
So what you think about every day is essentially what's going to manifest in your behavior as well.
It can.
Okay.
Right? And so even guarding, and that's what Ibn al-Qayyim argues, right? He says, guard your passing thoughts.
Okay.
Guard your fleeting thoughts. And because if you don't guard your fleeting thoughts, then it might turn into fantasies and it'll be harder then. And then guard your fantasies. Why? Because your fantasies might then become intentions. And then guard your intentions or check your intentions. At every level, he's saying, check your fleeting thoughts, check your fantasies, how many times do people just entertain a thought and then that turns into a habit and then that turns into an addiction and then that turns into, and so Ibn al-Qayyim says, check these things way at the beginning before they manifest into the next level.
Nip it in the bud, as they say.
Yeah. In each time, it will become something that's different. So he says, check your fleeting thoughts, then check your fantasies, then check your intentions, and then check your habits.
Yeah.
And then check or before that, he says your commitments, because before you intend something, then you commit to something like, I'm going to do this.
Sure.
And then once you do it, he says, check it at that door before it becomes a habit. And then once it becomes a habit, it'll become something that's very difficult for you to resolve.
Gotcha.
So the Prophet ﷺ says that you guard the head and what it contains, and that you guard your stomach. That you guard your stomach from whatever it is that you consume with it.
So
you do not be deluded with the dunya.
Okay.
That you think a lot about the hereafter.
To keep the final goal in mind.
Yeah, because the final goal in mind will always make you reconsider if doing this action or making this statement is worth it.
It's just the Gary V. He mentions a lot. He reminds people, you're gonna die. Yeah. And so
it's true. You are gonna die. Before Gary V, Allah reminds us, and he says, you are going to die. Every soul is going to taste death. And so what that then does is that it makes it all about legacy.
Yeah.
All about future. What is this going to, this joke that I can make right now, and yes, it'll get shared by like 100 people.
Yeah.
What is that going to do for me on the Day of Judgment?
It's John Hopkins basketball coach is that people often trade what they want most for what they want now.
That makes absolutely sense, and it's absolutely true.
Yeah. So consider opportunity cost for behavior. And because at the end of the day, what you're doing now, what you're saying yes to doing now, you're potentially saying no to another opportunity. And the question is...
And sometimes you're saying no to what you say you want most.
Yeah.
Or what you do want most.
So idea is also to be deliberate in your behaviors while keeping the end goal in mind. So all of that is encompassing of having modesty. Hayyee. Don't sell yourself short, guys and gals. See you in the next episode.
Assalamu alaikum.